The Rickey Smiley Morning Show.
It's the front page news.
It's what's trending now.
President Trump is refusing, listen to this, Brett, is refusing to admit that he lost and concede the election to Joe Biden. And he is also filing lawsuits around the country to try to challenge the vote count. So we want to know what does all of this mean, and can Trump really get away with what happens if he refuses to leave the White House? Now, we have reached out to somebody who really knows all about election law and Constitution. Please help. Welcome, Franita Tolsone, the Vice Dean and Professor of Law at the University of Southern California. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Morning. Have we? First, my question is: have we ever been in a situation like this before, where a sitting president refuses to leave, and what happens if Trump never concedes the election?
Okay, so let me start by saying that we don't know if he's refusing to leave yet, right? We are in constitutional crisis if it's January 20th and he's saying the White House is my house, right? So January 20th is Inauguration Day. If he doesn't leave then we have a problem. But right now, he can litigate to his heart's content, right? There's no legal effect of a concession. If he refuses to concede, nothing happens, right? Congress meets in January. They count the Electoral College votes. On January 20th, we get a new president.
Well, we keep hearing that Trump has no proof of voter suppression in these lawsuits that he's filing. Now, in your opinion, do any of these lawsuits have merit in court?
So the claims that the president is making. So first, let me say there's plenty of evidence of voter suppression. Black and brown voters dealt with voter suppression this election cycle. Mm-hmm. So I want to be clear about that, because that often gets lost in this narrative of historic turnout, right? So we had north of 145 million people turn out and vote in this election, but there were a lot of black and brown people who were denied that opportunity. What the president is claiming is that there's voter fraud, right? That that poll workers are, there are a number of voting irregularities where poll workers are not counting the votes properly, that they're claiming that there are observers who, each political party has individuals who stand and oversee the vote count, that the observers can't get close enough to see the vote count, that challengers who are witnessing irregularities are being thrown out of the polls, just a number of things, right? That poll workers aren't verifying signatures properly. So they've brought a series of cases alleging that there are these irregularities taking place in the vote count, and also that there's significant voter fraud, and they have produced zero evidence in all of these cases. Judges are throwing them out. And in the few cases where they have been successful has been very small issues. So the claim that their observers couldn't get close enough, a judge said, okay, we'll let them get closer, right? But this is not the type of thing that would change the outcome of the election, right? The margins are pretty substantial in some of these states. For example, Pennsylvania is the difference between Vice President Joe Biden and the president is about 45,000 votes. Right. Who cares if your observers can get close enough to see? How do you overcome a 45,000 vote deficit bringing these very small issue cases? And the answer is that you can't.
With that being said, it is hilarious that the Republican Party is now crying voter suppression when they're the ones known for creating laws that limit voter rights that hurt black and brown people. So how do you see the Republicans using this election to further limiting voting access in the future?
So, and that's one of my biggest worries, right? So, especially in Pennsylvania, which has, emerged as a real battleground state in this election, you may see so it's a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor, but you may still see efforts to make voting harder in the future. They may try to make it more difficult to vote by mail. So we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and a fair number of people voted by mail this cycle, but that doesn't mean it was easy in every state. So in Indiana, for example, you couldn't vote absentee without an excuse. But you could if you were over 65, right? So, younger voters who were old enough to vote couldn't vote absentee unless they had another excuse. And you saw sort of, differential treatment like that with respect to absentee voting in some states. I think you'll see more of that. Right, they'll try to make it, because a lot of people realize that, hey, I can vote without having to stand in line for hours. I can, that this is an option for me. And I think the response to that by some Republican legislatures will be, no, it's not. Right, they're going to try to make it more difficult for people to vote by mail in the future.
Did any of that stuff backfire on Trump? Didn't something backfire on Special K when he was like, I don't know what I was.
As far as the mail-in?
Yes.
Yeah, because he was telling people not to vote by mail or not to trust the mail. And
Yes.
so that had a lot of his own voters that listened to his advice. So most of his votes, that's where their votes were counted early, but then all the mail-in votes were by the Democrats, and they came in later and overtook the ones who, were voting for Trump. But my question is this, so for Ms. Tolsone. So Joe Biden already started working on his transition to the White House, but then yesterday we hear that the transfer of power officially can't happen until the director of the GSA acknowledges that Biden won. So what is the GSA for people that don't know, and why are they important?
So the General Services Administration is the agency that oversees the transition. And so what happens is that the administrator that oversees that particular department, she ascertains a winner based on the election results. So it's not about who's inaugurated on January 20th. It's about who won the election on November 3rd. And so the point of it is to free up funds. So Joe Biden did receive some money prior to the election, which, helped sort of prepare him in case he won the election. But post-election, the GSA is supposed to help with, doing background checks, helping the transition team with some of the hiring decisions that they'll make. Not necessarily who will be hired, but just sort of the human resourcey personnel type issues that come up. We were in a similar situation in 2000 where the 2000 presidential election went unresolved for 34 days. So the Bush campaign essentially had to use private funds in order to conduct its transition. But what's going on now is that the Biden campaign is saying they may actually go to court on this because she's refusing to recognize. I think this is one of those issues where it's still fairly early, so I'm not panicked yet. But talk to me in a week.
So yeah, that's what I was about to ask you now. From your professional experience and everything that you're seeing in all of the facts that you have, how do you see this playing out?
I see this as much more of a political fight than a legal one, right? Because for the last 6 days, I've been reading all of these complaints, and I'm like, why are they bringing these cases without any evidence? Why is it was just this flurry of litigation that didn't seem to make much legal sense. And I realized that there's just a broader narrative here, right? It's about casting doubt on the outcome of the election. And one thing that confirmed that for me is yesterday, the Attorney General issued a memo where he tasked his officials with investigating election irregularities, right? And in the memo, he says, look, investigate election irregularities that could be potentially outcome determinative. But if it doesn't affect the outcome, just ignore it, right? And so imagine you live in Pennsylvania and the DOJ starts an investigation. All of a sudden, you're thinking, wow, there must be some there, right? That something must be up. Something ain't right. And so you have that coupled with a flurry of litigation. Because most people don't pay attention to the outcome, right? They just know somebody's suing. When somebody sues, that says to the average person something is wrong. And I realize all of this is about the political story. It is about the narrative. It is not about winning these legal cases. It's about convincing the American public that the election was rife with fraud and irregularities so that he can challenge the outcome. And that's honestly, our system, that's really hard to do. He's behind in, I think, 4 or 5 states that are central to the Electoral College win. He would have to overcome significant hurdles in order for that narrative to really have some power here.
So, in your opinion, Joe Biden will be sworn in January the 20th.
In my opinion, he is the president-elect, and he will be sworn in on January 20th.
Wow. Eva, what are your thoughts? You sit up there watching the news all day. I know this is a relief for you to hear. Because we were talking this morning. Yeah, we sit up, we text each other all day. We are on the news. Still, I just can't be still. I'm trying to get all of the information and see what the mood is and what is the which way is the wind blowing,
I understand,
but the tone seems
nervous.
So good right now. As you saw the former vice president address the country, he does it in such a presidential way. I know it wasn't an official presidential address, but the way he's setting the tone about the importance of this pandemic, getting it under control, and uniting everyone that is divided right now is exactly what we need. So I cannot wait till he's sworn in January. I don't care what Trump does.
In some ways, we've been in an abusive relationship for the last 4 years.
Yes.
If you think of it, the president's Twitter feed has held us hostage, and it's just different to listen to someone who doesn't do that. I think a lot of this election, I know it seemed close because we were focused on a handful of states, right? But Joe Biden did win the national popular vote by more than 4 million votes.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it is because people are exhausted. Like, I'm
Right.
exhausted just reading these cases and realizing that there's nothing there.
Right. The last question I'm going to ask you real quick, because we're running out of time, but I have to ask you this, and I apologize.
Okay.
You reading all of the cases, everything that's being filed, is there anything that caught your eye that stick out that you think might have some legs that they're filing?
Yes, but not for necessarily this election, right? So there's a claim about the power of state legislatures to set the rules for presidential elections, free of state courts, free of state constitutions, that they have sole authority to do this. That will have some legs, I think. But I don't think it'll have legs for this particular dispute.
Oh, wow. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Tolsone, thank you so much for joining us this morning. If people want to know more, how can they keep up with you?
I'm on Twitter at Prof. Tolsone. I'm also on Instagram at Prof. Tolsone.
There it is, man. Thank you so much for schooling us today. That was so much.
Good old AKA in the building.
Now member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority
Wait a minute.
Incorporated.
Congratulations for having the first VP. That's right.
I know. It's awesome.
All right.
That black girl magic.
There it is, y'all. It's Rickey Smiley Morning Show.